Here's something almost nobody tells you when you grow your first bell pepper. This isn't a one-and-done harvest. Cut that pepper off, and if you take care of the plant right, it keeps making more. Same plant, multiple harvests. But here's the part that trips almost everyone up. There's one specific stage where most people accidentally kill that second harvest without realizing it. And I'll show you exactly where that happens and how to avoid it. So today, full journey, start to finish. Seed, transplant, flowering, harvest, and exactly what to do after that first pepper comes off, so you're not left guessing like everyone else clearly is. Start indoors 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost date. Small seed trays or plugs work fine, filled with a light seed starting mix. Not regular potting soil, which is too dense for tiny root systems just getting started. Here's the one tip that made the biggest measurable difference I found from an actual experienced grower. Separate your seedlings early, before their roots have a chance to tangle together. One grower documented plants coming out twice as large at 4 weeks, just from doing this one step sooner rather than later. If you start multiple seeds in one tray, don't wait until they're crowded and root-bound to split them apart. Do it the moment they've got their first true leaves. You can, it's not wrong. The reason most growers don't is space and success rate. Seeds don't all germinate, so starting several together and moving the strongest ones forward wastes less space and fewer resources than dedicating a full-size pot to every single seed, most of which you'd have to remove anyway. Once your seedlings have several sets of true leaves and look sturdy, move them into their permanent container. This is where a lot of container growers go wrong before they've even planted a single flower. Too small a pot. Bell peppers need a genuinely large container. A 5-gallon pot is the bare minimum, but 7 to 10 gallons gives noticeably better results. Peppers in undersized pots survive, but they stay smaller, dry out faster, and produce fewer, smaller fruit. If you've ever seen someone complain their peppers just don't get big, undersized pots are one of the most common reasons why. Full sun, 6 to 8 hours a day, minimum. If your seedlings started on a covered porch or partial shade, transition them gradually into full sun over about a week, rather than moving them all at once, which can shock and stress young plants. Watering is the other piece people ask about constantly, and the honest answer is, it depends on your container, not the calendar. Check the top 2 inches of soil. If it's dry, water thoroughly until it drains from the bottom. In hot weather, that can mean daily watering for a pot this size. In cooler weeks, every 2 to 3 days is often enough. What matters more than frequency is consistency. Peppers that swing between bone dry and soaked are far more stressed than peppers watered slightly less often, but predictably. This is the moment that breaks the most hearts in container pepper growing. Flowers appear, everyone gets excited, and then they just fall off before turning into fruit. Containers make this worse than in-ground growing, for one specific reason. Pots heat up faster than garden soil. On a hot sunny day, a dark-colored container can push soil temperatures well above the surrounding air temperature. And pepper pollen doesn't survive well above roughly 90 degrees in daytime heat, or when nighttime temperatures stay above 75. On the other end, if nights drop below about 55 degrees, that stops fruit set just as effectively. The fix? On scorching afternoons, give your pots a few hours of shade, rather than full baking sun all day. Keep watering consistent, so the plant isn't also fighting drought stress at the same time. And don't panic over the first round of dropped flowers. As temperatures stabilize, plants typically start setting fruit more reliably. Fertilizer timing genuinely matters here, and it's one of the most requested details I found. People specifically want the real schedule, not just fertilize regularly. Early on, during leafy growth, use a fertilizer higher in nitrogen. This builds the strong root system and healthy foliage the plant needs before it can support fruit. Once flowering starts, switch to a fertilizer lower in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus and potassium, which supports flowering and fruit development instead of just more leaves. Too much nitrogen at the wrong stage is a real, common mistake. It gives you a lush, leafy plant with disappointingly few peppers because the plant is investing all its energy into leaves instead of fruit. This is genuinely contested advice, and I found conflicting claims across other videos, so let's be direct about it. Most experienced growers land on pinching the top growth tip early, which encourages the plant to branch out sideways instead of growing one tall, thin stem. Bushier plants generally support more fruit, not less. The concern some growers raise, that pruning gives you fewer, smaller peppers, tends to apply more to aggressive pruning later in the season, not early pinching while the plant is still young and establishing its shape. The safe rule: pinch once early to encourage branching. After that, let the plant do its thing. Don't keep cutting it back throughout the season expecting more benefit. One specific complaint came up over and over in the comments I dug through: peppers that look healthy, but the fruit itself never gets much bigger than a golf ball. 3 things usually cause this, and they stack. First, pot size again. Small containers cap how much fruit a plant can support, no matter how well you feed it. Second, inconsistent watering. Peppers that dry out and get soaked repeatedly put energy into surviving stress rather than growing fruit. Third, and less obvious, too many peppers set on one plant at once. If a plant is holding 6 or 7 developing fruit simultaneously, each one gets a smaller share of the plant's energy. Some growers deliberately remove a few of the earliest, smallest fruit to let the remaining ones grow larger. It feels counterintuitive to cut away food, but it often produces a better overall harvest. Container peppers actually deal with fewer pests than in-ground plants, simply because there's less soil-borne pest contact, and it's easier to inspect and isolate a problem early. But aphids, spider mites, and whiteflies still show up, and each one leaves a different signature. Aphids cluster on new growth and the underside of leaves. You'll usually spot a sticky residue on leaves below the infestation before you spot the bugs themselves. Spider mites are nearly invisible to the naked eye, but they leave fine webbing between leaves and stems, plus a stippled, dusty-looking discoloration on leaf surfaces. Whiteflies scatter in a small visible cloud the moment you disturb the plant. If you brush a leaf and see tiny white specks fly up, that's your answer. For an organic approach, check leaf undersides regularly, since that's where most pests hide first. A strong spray of water knocks off light infestations, particularly effective on aphids and spider mites. For anything more established, insecticidal soap handles most common container pests without synthetic chemicals, and it's safe to use right up until harvest. Back to where we started. After you harvest a pepper, the plant doesn't stop. It keeps flowering and setting new fruit through the rest of the growing season, as long as it's healthy, fed, and getting consistent water and sun. One plant, multiple harvests, right through until the weather turns cold. So here's that one failure point I mentioned at the start. It's not the harvest itself that kills the second round of fruit. It's what happens right after. People pick the first pepper, feel accomplished, and quietly stop feeding and watering as consistently, assuming the hard part is over. The plant is still working just as hard as it was before that first harvest. Keep the same feeding schedule and watering consistency going after you pick, not just before, and it keeps producing. When the season does end, you have options. In most climates, the plant won't survive frost outdoors, and you'll treat it as done for the year. But, and this is worth knowing, peppers are actually tender perennials, not true annuals. With the right steps, the same plant can survive winter indoors and come back next spring even stronger. That's involved enough to deserve its own full walkthrough, so I'll cover exactly how to do that safely in a dedicated video. That's the full journey, seed to first harvest, and everything after it that most videos never get around to explaining. If you're building out a container vegetable garden, check the tomato video next. Same container logic, different crop, different mistakes to avoid.